Imagine thinking you've completely cured a broken leg just because you severed the nerve that feels the pain,
You definitely wouldn't call that healing.
right? You would call that a highly dangerous illusion.
Yeah.
But when it comes to our emotional and psychological health, we actually do this every single day.
We really do. We're deeply conditioned to look for the absolute absence of pain as the ultimate proof that a problem has been solved.
We even celebrate it.
Yeah.
We see someone who has gone completely numb to a difficult situation, and we applaud them for being unbothered or just moving on.
Like they've somehow won the breakup or won the conflict by caring the least.
Exactly. Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are going completely off the beaten path of what pop psychology usually tells us.
Yeah, we have a really dense, fascinating stack of clinical texts in front of us today.
We do, and it challenges one of modern culture's absolute favorite concepts, which is this idea of healing. Specifically, the kind of healing that tells you to just detach, block it all out, and protect your peace at all costs.
Because the clinical research we are looking at today argues something radically different. It suggests that this highly celebrated emotional detachment is, well, it's often just a massive biological parlor trick.
And that is our mission for you, the listener, today. We're going to explore why feeling nothing or being detached is actually a physiological trap.
We'll get into what your nervous system is physically doing to enforce that numbness.
And crucially, how to actually wake that system back up.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the fundamental distinction established right at the top of our source material is just a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. It states that emotional detachment is constantly and mistakenly labeled as healing.
Right. But experiencing relief is not the same thing as achieving integration.
To understand why this misconception even happens, we have to acknowledge a basic biological drive. I mean, it just feels incredibly good to stop hurting.
Obviously.
Yeah. When you are in a state of emotional overwhelm, your system is flooded with stress hormones.
Oh.
If you can subtly detach, if you can just shut that flood off, the immediate sensation is profound relief. Like the fire alarm finally stops blaring in your head.
Exactly. Emotional detachment dampens your reactivity. It creates this immediate buffer zone between you and whatever is causing you distress.
And because that sudden quiet feels so peaceful compared to the chaos you were just standing in, you think the issue is resolved.
But from a clinical perspective, the text points out that this is a critical error. What's fascinating here is that the nervous system hasn't actually processed or resolved the underlying trauma or stress.
It has simply retreated from it.
Right. The system remains in a highly protective, defensive state, but it rebrands that state as progress.
You haven't neutralized the threat. You've just built a very thick wall around it and decided to live your life entirely outside that wall.
Yeah, it's avoidance masquerading as enlightenment.
It makes me think of a car with a severely broken engine. Like, imagine you are sitting at a red light and the engine is shaking violently.
Like it's about to fall apart.
Exactly. It's terrifying. The whole chassis is rattling, and you feel like the car is going to explode. So you grab the gear shift and slam it into neutral.
And the shaking stops.
The shaking stops. The car is quiet. The engine purrs smoothly. It feels fixed. But, you aren't actually driving anywhere. The light turns green. You hit the gas, and you just rev in place.
You're just idling.
Right. You have stopped the violent vibration, but you have completely sacrificed your ability to move forward.
That is a perfect way to look at it. You've sacrificed your relational capacity, your ability to actually engage with the world, just to stop the shaking.
Which we see all the time, right?
Constantly, especially in modern dating or friendships. Someone goes through a terrible breakup or a friendship betrayal, and their response is to become completely, rigidly hyper-independent.
They just ghost people at the first sign of conflict.
Yeah, they refuse to rely on anyone. They look at their life. They notice they aren't crying anymore, and they declare themselves healed. In reality, they've just put the car in neutral.
But wait, let me push back on this on behalf of anyone listening who might be in the thick of a crisis right now.
Sure.
Isn't taking a step back and detaching sometimes absolutely necessary just to survive? Like, if that car is shaking that violently, putting it neutral stops it from rattling itself to pieces.
Oh, absolutely. And the source text actually clarifies this exact nuance.
Okay, clear.
If detachment means creating temporary space from overwhelming stimuli specifically to reestablish stability like triage, essentially, then it is a perfectly valid and necessary survival step.
You have to stabilize a crashing system before you can work on it.
Precisely. The line is drawn when that detachment becomes a lifestyle. If it becomes a sustained reduction in your emotional engagement, or if you build an entire identity around non-attachment as a defense mechanism, it is no longer healing.
You're just normalizing a protective state.
Right, you're living in neutral.
Okay, so the psychological illusion is that we've found peace because we've normalized the neutral gear. But what is actually happening under the hood? Like, if I'm numb, what is my nervous system physically doing to enforce that numbness?
Well, the text introduces a concept from polyvagal theory to explain this biological reality. The specific term is dorsal vagal shutdown.
Let's slow down for a second. Before we get to the shutdown part, we need to explain what we're actually shutting down.
Fair point.
For anyone who isn't a neuroscientist, what exactly is the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory?
Think of the vagus nerve as an information superhighway. It runs from your brainstem all the way down through your face, your heart, your lungs, and right into your gut.
So it's basically the physical bridge between your mind and your body.
Exactly. And polyvagal theory maps how this specific nerve pathway regulates our sense of safety and danger. When you face a threat, your autonomic nervous system reacts.
And the first line of defense is usually social engagement, right? Like talking it out.
Right. And if that fails, you drop into fight or flight mode. Adrenaline pumps. You get ready to battle or run away.
But what happens when you can't fight and you can't run?
That is when the dorsal branch of the vagus nerve takes over. When the nervous system decides that the overwhelm is just too great and there is no escape, it resorts to its most primitive defense mechanism.
It pulls a plug.
It literally initiates the dorsal vagal shutdown. Your heart rate drops, your pain receptors numb, and you physically and emotionally dissociate.
Wow. It's a complete system override.
It is playing dead to survive a predator. This response produces a state that feels heavily like isolation, withdrawal, or total apathy.
Because it's trying to protect you.
Yes, but to you, the organism, it creates the false impression that separation equals safety. It tricks your brain into believing that biological disconnection is the same thing as emotional regulation.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because the text doesn't just keep this in the realm of biology or clinical therapy.
No, it expands it massively.
It brings in the work of Gregory Bateson to look at how this biological shutdown plays out in our wider culture, especially in how we view personal growth.
For those who don't know, Bateson was a 20th century anthropologist and systems theorist.
Right. He studied how entire systems, whether they are biological, ecological, or social, regulate themselves. And his work suggests there is no meaningful separation between mental health and spirituality.
They are different expressions of the exact same underlying system of perception and relationship.
So this dorsal vagal shutdown is actually celebrated in certain modern spiritual spaces and self-help communities.
Well, absolutely. The idea of becoming totally unbothered, ascending above the messiness of human emotion, or being utterly detached from the actions of others, it's held up as the ultimate achievement.
But Bateson's framework warns us that celebrating this disconnection is biologically backward.
It's totally backward.
It's like a bear that goes into a cave to hibernate so it can survive a brutal, freezing winter. That is a brilliant conservation strategy for survival.
It keeps the bear alive.
But imagine the bear wakes up, looks around the pitch-black cave, and says, wow, I have reached ultimate enlightenment. I feel no cold. I feel no hunger. I have mastered the elements.
Which is absurd.
No, buddy, you are just asleep in a dark box. You have mistaken the sensory deprivation of the cave for a higher state of consciousness.
I love that analogy. When you evaluate this kind of detachment within the larger system of relational awareness, the whole thing falls apart.
It just doesn't hold up.
Right. Resolving the pain of life isn't achieved by retreating into the cave permanently, nor is it achieved by stepping out of the cave just to adopt other people's beliefs to fit into a group.
Because that is simply masking.
Exactly. Both paths avoid the central, fundamental task of being a human, which is restoring your capacity to relate to the world around you.
So if the dorsal vagal shutdown, the bear cave, the idling car engine, is a biological trap that just mimics peace, how do we get out?
We have to move toward a different biological state.
Right. If the goal isn't to stay numb, what is the actual destination and how do we wake the system back up safely?
The clinical destination is the opposing biological state called ventral vagal activation.
Ventral vagal activation.
Yes. This is the state where the front-facing branch of your vagus nerve is engaged. It is not just relief from pain, it is active, safe re-engagement.
Meaning you're actually participating again.
Yes. When you are in a ventral vagal state, Your nervous system is no longer organized around protection or withdrawal. It is organized around connection.
The text has a specific phrase for this that I want to highlight for you. It says, the goal is not to feel less. The goal is to feel accurately within a system that can hold what it feels.
That is the core of it. Healing is a restoration of the capacity to remain present within relational complexity without becoming completely overwhelmed.
It makes me think of the difference between computer hardware and software.
How so?
Well, if your old computer keeps crashing every time you run a heavy software program, like the incredibly messy software of human intimacy or workplace conflict or vulnerability, the detachment strategy is just deleting all the heavy software.
Right, you just uninstall relationships.exe tech.
Exactly. Your old computer stops crashing. It runs perfectly smoothly, but it is just an empty hard drive. It can't do anything meaningful anymore.
Because you've removed all the programs that make it useful.
Right. True regulation isn't deleting your software. It is upgrading your biological hardware. You are building a stronger motherboard so your nervous system can run those complex programs without the fan spinning out of control and shutting the system down.
Clinically, we say you are increasing your window of tolerance.
But let's ground this for the listener. How does someone sitting in their living room right now actually do this?
Because you can't just snap your fingers and tell your vagus nerve to switch from dorsal shutdown to ventral engagement.
Right. If someone has been emotionally numb for years to protect themselves, how do they safely upgrade their hardware?
It requires a very slow, incremental process called titration. You don't jump straight from the bear cave into a chaotic, emotionally intense situation.
That would just trigger another shutdown, right?
Okay. Immediately, yes. Instead, you introduce microdoses of connection. It starts with somatic, physical signaling to the brain that the environment is safe.
What does that look like in practice?
This can be as simple as focusing on the physical sensation of your feet on the floor, or engaging in deep, slow exhales, which physically stimulate the vagus nerve to slow the heart rate.
So you have to convince the physical body it's safe before the mind will follow.
Exactly. The body leads the way. Furthermore, you utilize something called co-regulation.
Co-regulation.
Yes, we are biologically wired to sync our nervous systems with the people around us. If you are stuck in a shutdown state, spending time in the physical presence of someone whose nervous system is calm, grounded, and regulated actually acts as a tuning fork for your own body.
Oh, wow. So you kind of borrow their biological stability until your own system remembers how to produce it.
That's beautifully put. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the metric for success is clear. True regulation restores your relational capacity. It allows for genuine presence and responsiveness.
And if it doesn't?
If your healing strategy results in a persistent, lingering sense of distance from other people, you aren't in a ventral vagal state. You are in a stabilized form of avoidance.
Which brings us to a crucial checkpoint in our discussion today. Once we have that capacity back, once we are running the upgraded hardware, what does that genuine connection actually look like in action?
Because it's not just about being around people.
Right. We have all been in situations where we are interacting with people, but it feels draining, fake, or suffocating.
The text provides a really useful framework for identifying genuine connection by drawing a sharp line between conformity and convergence.
Let's break those down. Give us a real-world example of the difference.
Imagine you are sitting in a workplace meeting, or even at a dinner party with an intimidating group of people.
Okay, setting the scene.
Someone suggests an idea or an opinion that you internally disagree with or that doesn't quite make sense to you. If you nod your head, smile, and agree with them out of a desperate need for social belonging or just to avoid conflict, that is conformity.
Because doing that means you are operating out of fear. Your nervous system is perceiving the social friction as a threat, so it abandons your internal truth to buy temporary safety.
You're shrinking yourself to survive the room.
Exactly.
Instead, when your nervous system is regulated in that ventral vagal state, you experience what the text calls resonance.
Resonance, I like that word.
It's the profound sensation of an independent insight you already held being suddenly mirrored externally by someone else.
So back in that meeting scenario.
Back in that meeting, it's the moment two colleagues independently review a set of data, look at each other, and simultaneously realize they've spotted the exact same hidden trend.
They didn't agree just to get along. They converged on the same reality.
Yes. The biological result of resonance is alignment rather than attachment.
And attachment implies dependency, right?
Very much so. Attachment is adopting someone else's framework because you don't have a solid one of your own, or because you are terrified of being isolated. It is a collapse of your identity into the other person.
But alignment is different.
Alignment happens when your nervous system remains open, but completely structurally sound. You can connect deeply with someone without losing your sense of self.
Someone else's thoughts or feelings are no longer perceived as a threat that will overwhelm you. They integrate with you.
Exactly.
Where the dorsal state narrows your vision and isolates you in the dark cave, this ventral state broadens your awareness while keeping you entirely coherent.
This raises an important question, though. How do we make sure our shared understandings with other people are actually real?
Right. How do we know we aren't just conforming again?
The text notes that true shared understanding isn't derived from a frantic social need to belong to a tribe. It comes from two independent minds recognizing the exact same underlying structural pattern in the world.
Because that insight is arrived at through direct perception, rather than adopted to reduce social discomfort.
And because of that, it integrates into your brain differently. It becomes part of a sturdy internal foundation.
So what does this all mean? If we pull all these clinical threads together for you, the listener, it paints a profoundly different picture of what it means to be a healthy human being.
It completely redefines healing.
It does. The ultimate evidence of healing isn't retreating to a mountaintop, sitting alone in perfect, undisturbed silence and feeling nothing.
Not at all.
The ultimate evidence of healing is having a deeply intact internal structure that allows you to walk down a crowded, noisy, messy street, engage with the complexity of the world, and meet it without defense.
Detachment reduces your contact with the world. True regulation restores your capacity for it.
That's the key difference.
The experience of recognition, of seeing your own independent understanding naturally reflected in someone else, is the biological proof that you are intact. You are meeting the world, not hiding from it.
Let's quickly recap the journey we just took you on today. We started by dismantling the cultural myth that severing the nerve to stop the pain is a victory.
We mapped out the biological trap of the dorsal vagal shutdown, where your vagus nerve tricks you into thinking isolation is safety.
We explored how to slowly wake that system up through microdoses of connection and co-regulation.
And finally, we arrived at the true goal, which is ventral vagal engagement.
Upgrading your hardware so you can feel accurately, hold those feelings safely, and connect deeply through true resonance rather than fear-based conformity.
If there is one core truth to take from this research, it is that healing is the capacity to remain in relational complexity.
Yes.
If a self-help strategy diminishes your emotional range or keeps you permanently distanced from others, it is simply a refined form of hiding.
It really makes you rethink every time you've ever justified avoiding a difficult conversation by saying, I'm just protecting my peace.
It definitely calls that into question.
Which actually brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with, something to mull over that builds on everything we've just discussed about systems and biology.
Let's hear it.
If true healing is the biological capacity to remain present in relational complexity without losing ourselves, how might our modern digital landscape be artificially trapping us in a societal dorsal vagal shutdown?
Oh, that's a fascinating angle.
Right. Think about the architecture of our digital lives.
Yeah.
We live in algorithmically curated bubbles designed to only show us what we already agree with.
We're totally insulated.
And if someone disagrees with you or presents a complex, uncomfortable viewpoint, you have a magic block button. You can just mute the complexity with a swipe of your finger.
You don't have to engage at all.
Are we mistaking the artificial safety of filtering out difficult human interactions for true nervous system regulation?
Wow.
And by doing that constantly, are we actually letting our biological hardware atrophy, losing our physical capacity for real-world, messy resonance?
It suggests we might be engineering our own mass isolation and just calling it a utopia.
It's something to think about the next time you're tempted to just swipe away an uncomfortable moment instead of sitting with it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We love unpacking these dense ideas with you.
It's been a great conversation.
Keep questioning the world around you, keep challenging the buzzwords, and remember, the goal isn't just to put the car in neutral to stop the shaking. The goal is to get the car back on the road,